Truss is merely telling the SNP that you will have to wait a generation when she says that, really, isn't she, when you think about it? And Effie Deans here, she points out, it's been almost 10 years since the last referendum. Well, what happens in another 10 years? After another 10, we would be getting close to a generation. 10 years in the lifetime of the UK is little more than an instant. So what Effie Deans here is suggesting quite correctly is that don't get caught up in that rhetoric, because, you know, a generation's going to come and then it's going to pass. And if we've tied ourselves into this sort of thing that we're not going with, that we don't want another referendum in this generation, well, what happens when a generation, so-called, passes? What happens when 20 years passes? And that's not going to be that long from now. So it's not very strong. It's not a very strong point to make. And the very next day, Stephen Daisley, who's another journalist, made essentially the same point. Perhaps he had been inspired by Effie Deans' article, I don't know. But he said, drop the once in a generation chat. It's fun to remind the nationalists of their own words, but unionists are beginning to talk about this as though it were a constitutional provision. Once in a generation was the SNP's rhetoric, not Westminster's, and it is strategically foolhardy to adopt it as a standard. Eventually a generation will pass, and when it does, Westminster will rue giving legitimacy to this notion. The pro-UK position is this: there was a referendum in 2014, the result was clear, the matter is settled, there will be no further referendums.